Okay, thank you guys for being here. I'm here with my younger brother, Bradley Brown, and one of my best friends, Kevin Guns. And we're here to wrap up 2021. Excuse my meeting's absence. It's been a very, very, very busy couple months. But just a couple topics. I'm not sure if we're even going to get to them because, as you guys know, it's very open nature conversation. The COVID-19 continued, January 6th insurrection, Biden and Harris getting nominated. Military withdrawal from Afghanistan. We might touch on Russia a little bit, the Rittenhouse trials, the winter storms and power failures in Texas, and not just there, other parts of the country as well. The George Floyd verdict, Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson going to space, and just other topics I'm sure we'll get to. But at the end of this year and wrapping up and kind of reflecting on where we're all at. It's very interesting. I think generations go through their own series of problems and everyone feels like they have it bad. And that's all relative. Like people's struggles are real to them in different capacities. People make the argument like, oh, someone else always has it worse. That doesn't really work because your pain is your pain. But I'm left with the impression, I wrote this the other day, that problem solving isn't enough. People will only problem solve when positive outcomes benefit their team. Doing what is simply right is not enough. When you have scientific experts on both ends of the aisle putting forth evidence that supports their theory, what is the normal citizen supposed to believe? Of course, you should perform a cost-benefit analysis and calculate probability. Is it better to get the vaccine? Better not to get the vaccine? But the actual calculation of probability has also been lost due to professional scientific inquiry telling us conflicting data. With that being said, this is how science is supposed to work. You have experts presenting their hypotheses with corresponding data, and over time, through increasing these data points, you come to a closer version of what is true. The main problem I see, though, is the scientific method with COVID has been broken for a while. And it's ideologically based, and it's starting to trickle over now into other ways of thinking, not just in the scientific community, not just dealing with COVID. People make the arguments that it was really built with Trump and sowing distrust amongst Americans, whether it's foreign influences from Russia or however you believe. Like the arguments over the kitchen table now amongst families, I think is kind of unprecedented in how heated it gets. And this, of course, through like history could just be my perception on every generation, like I said, going through their own issues. But this idea that the scientific method now doesn't really matter, it's becoming broken because you have scientists on both sides, let's say, just to bring up a specific example of the vaccine, that are putting forth valid, very good evidence supporting one way or the other. And since this is so new, we don't have long-term data to really figure out what's the right decision. And it's causing a lot of divide in people in the corporate realm. Another point, I know, Brad, like you're in the corporate realm, and Guns, you're a teacher, so a public teacher. So you guys are held to a certain level of scrutiny. So throughout this conversation, if you don't want to speak to anything, it's totally understandable. I get it. But it's sad now that people can't separate, like, oh, this person has a differing opinion than me, but we could still be friends. We're still family members. It's on another level. So I just wanted to open it up with that. But do you guys have any countering points or anything to say on that?
I just, to what you kind of noted there, just like kind of how our society is super polarizing at the moment. It seems, tribalism is so like evident at the moment, but it also seems people are just lumping their ideas. And so, like when you say you're on one side, they think that you're also believing this idea. So for example, if you are against the vaccine, if you're an anti-vaxxer, you must have had no problem with the people who raided like the Capitol on the same day, which is totally, that's not a compatible like comparison, but to that extreme, I think that's where we're at in a way. And you could say that about the other
True.
side as well.
because that's a logical fallacy, right? Off the bat. But stereotypes exist right for a reason. They're usually based somewhere in truth, even though there's a massive bell curve and it's totally not logical to equate A, B to C with that. People will make the argument, Brad, like, oh no, they're justified in thinking if you're an anti-vaxxer, you are probably not just a Trump supporter or Republican, but an outlandish right-winger, and that you're okay with the insurrection because there was some sort of malice on the left, mainly based in voter fraud, where you were justified in breaking the law. And we're stuck last year looking at the TV. I'm finding myself, is this real? Like, are we living in Roman times where we're looking at these mobs of individuals storming the Capitol building? Like, what the fuck is going on?
Right.
Like, it's crazy. Yeah. Great. Can you pull that up? So that video to the left, and then we'll jump into the first story of the insurrection event. So, not being biased, CNN just had this video and I pulled it up. But okay, so what we're looking at is January 6th surveillance video shows 3-hour battle in the Capitol tunnel. It's a security camera captured this footage, but it looks medieval. Look at that. It looks medieval. This trips me out. That's crazy.
He's hanging from the tunnel and trying to kind of head stomp them, it looks like.
So you have a bunch of officers protecting the gates. And right, like my mind goes to Hollywood when I see something like this because it's an archway and all those people out there. Look at the tribes. The tribes are at war.
Right. It looks like a guy just came from work. I see a hard hat in the crowd there somewhere. The guy's got a construction hat on.
You have extremism on both sides. Doesn't matter the political party.
But it's kind of crazy. So, all right, Grant, you can pause it and then pull up the article, please. So the first one, if you scroll down, we already touched on COVID a little bit, but so the election fallout, January 6th, insurrection. So this started and people believed that Trump incited the riot with some of his words. I've watched the video a couple times and maybe we'll add it in for you guys to watch too. But from what I gathered is his speech as a leader was outlandish and brash. Do I think it directly was asking for what happened? Absolutely not. And he followed up and also like, hey, guys, quit it. Like this
wasn't that after the fact that it already started?
Of course, yeah. He was course correcting. He was
right, a little too late.
Yeah.
For what happened.
Yeah.
But I see your point though, because the words never came out to like go take on the Capitol.
True. And then that's what the law is supposed to do, right? Is interpret this language. Because sometimes you don't have to say directly A, B, and C. If it was close enough and you're inciting violence, because that would fall under that law, right? This was an inciting violence. It's a little fringe, and I've always been scared of draining the swamp. I think there's so many valid points in that, and the general idea of anti-corruption and not wanting our political leaders to be corrupt, and we're electing them, and all this stuff happening behind closed doors. That was original Trump ideology, which I'm like, that sounds good. But through the course of time, to fast forward to that speech, he literally says, and I'm paraphrasing, like voter fraud. He's speaking to high levels of voter fraud. We can't allow this to happen. Like, you guys are going to lose your country. We're heading in the wrong direction if you don't stand up and do something about it. Which is like, okay, so you take, there's fraud of any sort, there's malice, there's wrongdoing. Of course, you want your citizens to like stand up, do what's right, whether it's BLM protesters standing up for what they believe in, Trumpers standing up for what they believe in. The insurrection, though, just took it to a level which it falls, of course, into illegal activity, and then it's just branded, right, as you get away from the core ideas that you were trying to communicate. Mm-hmm. So do you guys think that like Trump could have communicated better messaging to get his point across of save America from political fraud happening in the White House. I
Well,
guess
what was the actual goal of this insurrection? What was the actual goal?
so. I think the protesters were literally at arms because they thought there was actual voter fraud, that Trump really won, and the cult per se gathers outside to ransack the building because the highest leader of the country has, in their mind, has led them to believe that there was true malice and we need to do something. But then it kind of spirals out of control, right? Because the mob-like mentality, when you're in front of the buildings and you start getting this group-like behavior and the first window smashed, then it's almost exponential. You see as acceptable, then you keep on going, You can analyze the intellect of these folks, right? It wasn't Sam Harris or Jordan Peterson
right.
Yeah.
like saying that's okay. But that's sad though, because people that aren't educated and are maybe a little bit easier swayed, they're gullible to they look to leaders to give them the word that they're supposed to base their decision making on, right?
Yeah, I will say it seems that, since I've been alive and just moderately or barely paid attention to politics, it seems Trump is able to get his very close, I don't even want to say followers because it makes it sound like a cult, but it is cult-like thinking at the end of the day if you're willing to do this, rush the Capitol for a political motive pretty much. But Trump is shit. What's the point on that?
You're good. No, it's Trump is.
Yeah, so Trump pretty much, he is one of the best presidents I've ever seen at getting his cult, his own followers, to act on his word with, with the most intention and charisma, right?
Yeah, he's a good orator.
Right.
Just the way Barack Obama, good orator.
Amazing communicator.
Handled himself very well. Amazing communicator, handled himself well. He was a role model of the president. There's just different strokes. And he's, Trump was very good at drawing a crowd and getting people to elicit an emotion in what he was saying, and that's a character trait.
Yeah, Grant, can you look up how many people were convicted of a January 6th crime? Just fast forward a little bit in that sequence of events. You have people caught up in emotion and doing all that shit, and I'm sure some of them regretted it. Who is the character that went viral because he had the crazy paint and the...
Oh yeah, he got charged. Well, the funny thing is that all these people are sitting at home and they're on social media and their feed is filled with like-minded ideology.
Oh, absolutely.
No one's scrolling through the opposing, viewpoints, trying to understand their perspective.
But the algorithm though of these apps, it does not work. It does not work that way. That's exactly what the social network is. It's an example of endless scrolling, and you're gonna have an endless scroll of the ideas that suit your ideology.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. So they are programmed to perform exactly as Gunn said, which is if it's all about most time on app, right? So if you are going to spend most time researching your side, then you're going to be fed a bunch of that stuff. But countering that though, let's say just the way you think or how you operate on the platform, let's say you're following 50 people, just to make it a simple example, 50 people on the left, 50 people on the right. If you're spending more time, let's say, on a select few on the left, the feed will populate that. But let's say you are purposefully thinking, I want to be balanced, I'm going to follow people on both ends of the aisle. Your feed will now populate that, and you could probably have a more bettering opinion, but that didn't happen, right? Over the past couple of years, it's been, you see someone post something opposite or outlandish, you usually just unfollow them, right? Or block them. You don't try to pick out maybe some grain of truth in their statement or post. It's oh, fuck, that triggered me. Unfollow. Block. And then
I don't do that, but
me neither.
Unless they're posting a hate speech or something that I'm greatly offended by. If it's an opposing opinion, I usually just continue to follow them. And sometimes I'll send them a DM and I talk to them and ask them questions and challenge their ideology. And sometimes it works.
Right.
Most of the time it doesn't.
Hop into the comments, see what they have to
is
say.
Is it asking too much though to be balanced and follow both ends, right? Because you're spending your leisure time on the app. So I can't blame someone for not, if you're super woke or whatever, how could you possibly follow a major Trumper and not get pissed off every time you see something? So like, I don't blame them for wanting to only surround themselves with thought-provoking content that makes them feel good. But you could also see how that leads to a dangerous wormhole. Because that's not reality. In the real world, you combat different thought processes and people and hues of color. Shout out to Skylar Tanksley. He always refers to like people's colors like just hues of color. It's like a fucking paintboard. You know, everyone's different. But so 727 people have been charged in the Capitol insurrection so far. 727 people.
That's crazy.
So what do you guys think about this? The faith in the judicial system? Because I would argue that the insurrection, of course, is illegal and wrong in communicating your ideas. And 727 people were held accountable, which hopefully, if now you have so much information, let's say the common person is more exposed to the occurrence and sequence of events, and if they're exposed to 727 people get arrested, oh, maybe next time I'm heated or if I'm getting in a mob to go do something, I'm not going to do X, Y, and Z because I'm going to be held accountable. The problem is when people see in the political system, let's say what started it, the fraud in the election cycle, they see it as a problem that can't be solved because the lawmakers and the people in power are performing these wrongdoings and not self-regulating. Like, so we're just at their mercy, right?
Yeah, they thought the system was faulty.
So, I mean, we're not experts in that matter, but how much of that is based in truth? How much fraudulent activity is happening that we can't necessarily control through our electoral process?
I'm not sure. I mean, when Trump won, they said we got to get rid of like the electoral college, right? But that's the best thing we have so far that works under our current system, because when it sways to a certain side, like I have a note here, like with the Russia collusion versus collusion, quote unquote, with what happened when they stormed the Capitol. What's the real difference? I mean, it seems that Trump's people, they took action in a single day. And then for 4 years, it was the media just relentlessly saying Russia, 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 when it turned out to be there wasn't collusion. To my knowledge.
They proved that to be discredited.
Right.
But what's the concept in sociology? Like if you say something enough, then the people end up believing it. You just have to say it enough. I forget the exact term, but the Capitol riots were gnarly, and the faith in our judicial system, to like close that point out, just if there's wrongdoing happening, the only way we're going to get somewhere in proposing a solution is you have to put X amount of faith in the system to, if there was fraud and Biden was wrongfully elected, you have to elect officials that hold the system accountable to then catch those perpetrators who, it's not going to be, Trump lost, I want it now, let's go storm the Capitol because I didn't get my decision now. No, you trust in the system over time to point out the wrongdoing. And just like the 727 people that got charges filed against them, they probably aren't going to storm a Capitol anytime soon.
Yeah, well, it's a popular American ideology that the people are supposed to keep their government in check.
Right.
Now, if you believe that people are inherently faulty, like I do, what's that one quote? Power corrupts, or all power corrupts. All power corrupts all, I think.
Yeah, it's
so it doesn't matter what side of the field you're on. The more power you have, the more faulty you are. And the whole idea is the people. Like I don't like the fact that they stormed the Capitol, but the fact that they use their rights to form an assembly and to air their grievances, it's great. The actual storming of the Capitol part, I don't think it was a good idea.
I agree, because let's say these corrupt politicians, quote unquote, we know that it's true to a certain extent, but maybe now they feel more self-scrutiny, like fuck, like maybe what we did was wrong. Look what happened. Next time we won't do it. That's what you hope. Mm-hmm. But you do think that people are corrupts who said power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely? Power corrupts absolutely. Yeah, I think people know it generally. But back to your point, Kevin, so you think people are naturally not born evil, but
I believe that people are, at the very least, they're going to focus on preserving themselves. So they're going to serve themselves because that's how we are naturally as humans.
As animals.
Is to, protect yourself. And then after yourself, it comes your family.
Right. And with the financial incentives that these politicians have year in and year out, that's all they're worried about is protecting their reelection, and they want to ensure that. And that goes all the way down to the local level with, states having sovereign power. And going back to the COVID thing, that's why you'll have one county that says you need a mask to walk into the gym, to come sit down at this restaurant. And then another state, we're saying, states like Florida saying that they'll dox you some way if you're wearing a mask in certain like restaurants. Like you got certain restaurant owners saying like, we'll refuse
Mask
you entry if you're wearing masks, which shows you kind of just
tribalism.
Tribalism, how far we are on the spectrum.
It's a big spectrum.
Like certain states, right?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, Florida and California, two extreme examples, but it's...
Well, no, it's good because you're talking about both ends of the bell curve. And just on that point real quick would be let the citizens vote with their dollar. And if you want red people moving to Texas because they agree with their laws, then they'll do that. And you'll have people flooding to LA and San Francisco. But that's still, if you're trying to stick true to the Constitution and the idea of America being this melting pot of ideas and people who can all get along, I think that idea kind of fights human nature, kind of as you were talking about, Kevin, with people being naturally selfish and looking out for themselves. But I think over time, we've definitely come a long ways. Where we'll go in the future, or if we're going to be here, or if the U.S. is in a collapse, I don't think it will. It's still up for debate. But the idea that you first watch out for yourself, then your familial unit.
It's biological.
Yeah.
It's not. I'm not saying everyone's selfish. I'm just saying at the very, very bottom in your structure as a human being, in your mind, the chemicals, survival.
Yeah.
But it's evolutionary beneficial to be selfish to a certain extent. You had to be.
Oh, absolutely.
If a tribe, somebody came along when your kids were starving and they're like, do you have any food to spare? And you could only give enough food to your children. What are you going to say?
Yeah, I've heard Jordan Peterson talk about this, because that argument is, of course, ground level of the battle of resources, right? Food, water, that makes sense. But we've come past that to where that still exists, but there's complex social fabrics now where there's ego and you get used to throwing on the suit every day and going into a position of power and writing legislation. And you could imagine how there's people putting forth ideas and laws that, let's say, they truly believe are bound in truth and good for their community and good for society, that in due time will be shown to be faulty. And how many times has that happened in history? Can you speak to anything, Guns, that maybe someone that really thought, let's go brash, Hitler. He thought he was literally doing good for his people and his society.
He thought he was saving
Even
Germany.
With all of the absolute atrocities we know to be true, he still, if we sat down right here and had a conversation, he would try to justify that what he was doing was right.
And a large portion of the German population wanted him as a leader. Not all of them. That would be incorrect.
Most, right?
A lot. Well, they were in the middle of the world was in the middle of a depression.
And they were blamed for World War I.
Yeah,
their economy was struggling.
Yeah. They had the treaty that was taking away their money, making reparations. And I mean, he did start turning the economy around. You can't really deny that, because in the late 30s, like 37 or 36, 38, Germany was a rising power. The people were coming out of the depression, whereas in the United States, we were still in it.
Yeah.
The only thing that brought us out of the depression was World War II.
No, and those facts, you should be able to compartmentalize them, that stating Hitler benefited the German economy for X amount of time is a fact that could exist in itself, because that's not directly tied to the atrocities. They're separate. And then you can, of course, judge which one is more important than the other. And anyone would say, oh, the equation at the end equates to a better economy, but you have to do X, Y, and Z. X, Y, and Z could make the outcome not worth it, right? That's just general logic. But people, to tie it back in, it was the idea that people are naturally selfish sometimes, and our politicians, to get reelected, and our system, something needs to be maybe updated, or citizens need to participate more in the process to hold our politicians accountable when electing folks that are going to represent your ideas and how you want the country to run.
Well, look up the last amendment to the Constitution was passed in the 90s. Grant, are you able to look that up?
Really, the last amendment?
It was
90s?
1993, if I had to guess. But check out this amendment.
That's an incredible function, by the way, right? The ability to amend the Constitution.
It's pretty hard, though, right?
It's supposed to be hard, designed that way.
Right.
Exactly.
Let's see here. So essentially
you
what
can read
this
it, Guns,
is,
if you want.
it says, no law varying the compensation for the services of the senators and representatives shall take effect until an election of representatives shall have intervened. What it's saying is that Congress and the House of Representatives cannot increase their pay. It took 200 years for that to pass the House.
They can't increase their own pay, like elect to make more money?
They can't increase their salaries.
Who's in charge of writing their salaries? Do you know?
No, I don't. But they can pass a bill or a law that will raise their salaries, but it doesn't take effect until the next person comes into their position.
Oh, that's cool.
200 years. Well,
what if you make a deal like the next person, hey, 15% of that increase, direct deposit, baby, here you go.
Yeah, here's my Venmo. Well, then you got to think about backdoor dealings as well, you know? It's been going on forever.
Oh, yeah. Grant, let's go. Brad, do you have a point? You good? No. Go back to the article, please. Let's get to the military withdrawal from Afghanistan, because real quick, we'll brush on the Biden-Harris. I think a lot of people are stoked. A lot of people are let down. In my opinion, it's very sad. I believe our president should be sitting on a porch somewhere enjoying coffee and whiskey with his family and just relaxing, enjoying the end of his days. But we were left with a double-edged sword there, in my opinion, on our last president-elect. So my hope is for the next go-around, I want to hear you guys' opinion too, that we get someone who is competent and charismatic and has a good and moral compass, and at least the best that we can absorb and know from not sitting down and knowing them, but just hearing what they have to say in public speaking matters. But next, that's my biggest hope. But there are leaders right now, and it's sad, and I bet there's a lot of people around the country that take them seriously, and there's a lot of people around the world that take our leaders seriously, and there's a lot of people around the world that are laughing at us and being like, oh, look at fucking America. The president can't even put together a solid sentence sometimes, that's sad. It's sad.
We have one that could put a sentence together barely every now and then another who could put sentences together, but talking on a third grade level. Or
could put a dagger of a sentence together, right? The idea of
repetition.
Yeah, not putting a sentence together at all, which is sad. You're seeing an old person becoming old, or you see someone who is good at speaking, charismatic, but the contents of what they're saying are just fucking daggers and rocks and causing a lot of controversy, but also agrees with the subset of people that love him. But the Biden-Harris thing, do you have anything to say on it, Guns? Are you good?
I think overall, I do like that women are making progress in representation in the United States government. I mean, Kamala Harris, she wasn't elected by the people. She was appointed there by Joe Biden, by President Biden. I would hate to see Biden for some reason pass away and for her to take over, because I want the first female president to be elected there by the people, not to be appointed there because the president passed away. So I think overall, I like to see that, women are moving up, and the glass ceiling for women and women's progress in this country is president. So that's the glass ceiling.
Mm.
So if in the year's future, hopefully we have a president who is female and can better represent her people and break that glass ceiling barrier. But I think that's one positive we can take back from 2021.
Yeah.
So
no, that's a great point. What would be ideal is a president-elect by the people to be a female that everyone, not everyone, but was elected, therefore X amount of people agree and want them to represent. People would be like, oh, for this to be the first one just because poor President Biden passed away or had to step down for whatever mental, physical reasons. That's not ideal. She
wasn't elected. She was appointed.
I know, but that's a fact in itself. And then another fact is our system was built, of course, to if something happens to the leader, someone has to step up. And then I forget, it was back in junior college, but then after if something were to happen to the vice president, then I think it's the Speaker of the House. So, then there's a third one in place, right? And it goes back. The system's generated almost like a military line there to be, if something happens, this is the process.
I'm not
it's
sure
not
who the fourth
ideal.
is, but
it's not ideal, but that's what would happen, right?
Is it the secretary and then Speaker of the House?
Secretary of State, maybe something like that.
Or, I'm not sure. It might be the Speaker of the House after the Vice President, but beyond the Speaker of the House, I'm not sure.
That's a good question. I don't know.
But it's there. It's there for a purpose.
Right.
Let's jump into the U.S. military withdrawal from Afghanistan. So this, holy hell, was decades of events that led to what actually happened. But for the common folk, I think speaking to the visual scenes and what people were actually exposed to with individuals clinging on to aircraft, fleeing the area and falling to their deaths from hundreds and hundreds of feet. So now you have something that's already a bad situation captured through the cell phone, exposed to the world at large, and it gets people on topic, right? People, understand what's happening, but emotional ties now, people see the harshness of the reality of someone falling from a plane and everyone wants answers. People are pointing fingers. It's terrible, but to my understanding, President Trump, the administration, had a deal back in February of 2020 that they would be withdrawing and had a deal with the Taliban, a contractual obligation, I'm pretty sure. And it was poor management on the resources. The generals, I think, dropped the ball. If you can kind of break it down to problem solving in a familial unit, to a corporation, to different problems in different capacities, you could clearly say, no matter what happened, problem solving and executing the plan was terrible, right? So that if that's evident in itself, it was not executed properly. Who dropped the ball? What individuals are held accountable? Is it the writing? Is it the nature of the plan that was faulty and it just was an impossible thing to happen? To my understanding, they predicted the Taliban would take over Kabul and spread in X amount of time, which ended up just being not even close to it. Like they took it in 48 hours or something like that.
I think what examples like this, when you can see it on the news, what it does more than anything, it drives the anti-war sentiment no matter what side you're on. Because when you see people literally grasping for their life, holding onto a plane, thinking that they're going to fly thousands of miles or somehow get up into the plane somehow, and all of this is all for naught with trillions of dollars spent, American lives lost. There's those videos came out when, I'm not sure, was it Julian Assange who leaked the stuff with like the helicopters taking out
people? Oh yeah,
like,
this was like mid 2000s.
Right. So all of this is
7-ish.
Right, and all of this, it seems to be build up to this, and then when you see it, when we're then you see the Taliban there in our hangars, dancing on tanks and stuff. Then people are like, this is what happens when we're in a place too long, and this is a misallocation of tax dollars. It's the extreme.
Grant, can you look
example
up?
of it.
Can you look up how much money was spent the war in Afghanistan?
Well, just to outfit one Marine, it's about, I think, $21,000. So think about that to start. That's how much it costs to
$21,000
them. Yeah.
And then what was the fact we heard downstairs from Crystal and Sagar, that the war in Afghanistan over the 20 years, more money was spent than the, what was it called in Europe after the, was it World War One or two? The something agreement?
The reconstruction of Western Europe.
The Marshall Plan.
Marshall Plan, you're right. So just to clear that fact out, 20 years in Afghanistan cost more, adjusted for inflation, than the entire Marshall Plan to rebuild Western Europe. Brad, you're right. Because you threw out trillion, and I was like, wait, a trillion?
No, it's trillions. I believe. Right.
Brown University estimated U.S. has spent $5.8 trillion on the war in Afghanistan. Like that number, like I'm trying to picture like the zeros in my head. It's kind of, you can't really contemplate how much money that is. That's so much money.
I don't know, like 20 figures or something like that.
Grant, can you do me a favor? Can you look up the national debt clock?
Oh, I've
seen this before. Looked that before?
Yeah. Just it's so fast.
So many zeros, dude.
You want to get some anxiety.
So
many
it was
zeros. What, 5.8 trillion? Whoa. Oh my gosh, look at that. Million. Oh, we're at 29 trillion?
That's a trillion. So you got 1,000, a million, a billion, a trillion.
Mm-hmm. So our national debt is 29 trillion, 376 billion, 5 million.
This is
like about to be 6.
Who makes this clock though?
I know. How does the data pouring in real time? That's pretty crazy to think about. But
I'm sure it's close. It's probably close.
I'll have to have an economist on to talk about, like a financier to this, the levels of this.
It just gives me anxiety. Look, the tax revenue. We make $4 trillion in taxes. How are we going to pay this off?
Okay, so let's tie this into the poor job of pulling out of Afghanistan. The general premise is you have elected officials, any government job, which is paid for with tax dollars, is supposed to do their best, not perfect, of course, no one's perfect, their best job in executing whatever it may be. In this specific example, imagine how complicated it would be pulling out human resources and infrastructure and all the resources associated with being there, with the complexities of and social tie-ups with preaching democracy and trying to build infrastructure in schools, and you have military contractors who are benefiting heavily being there and keeping these contracts alive and continuing the ammunition supply, money supply, resource supply. And it could be painted with like we're here for a good reason, right? It's morally permissible to be here because we are that city upon a hill. We're trying to help out the community and shed light on Western democracy, and this is how you should be living. But Guns, you brought it up earlier. From my understanding, a lot of people there didn't want us there. They've
been doing their own thing for 2,000 years. Why do they want someone else from another country to come in there and...
They don't want Mercedes and frickin'...
No. They have enough internal conflict as it is between Sunni and Shia Muslims.
Shiite? Yeah, the Shiite. Right?
Sunni and Shia? Shiite?
Shiite. I think it's Shiite. Could be wrong.
Yeah, Sunni and Shiite Muslims. But they've had internal conflict minus any kind of democratic powers coming in and trying to, culturally imperialize their territories. They've had their own issues like we have, but we've only been a country for less than 300 years.
And what did you say earlier? Right. It was funny, but it was bound in truth. Like we're trying to apply democracy or show people this way of living when they still stone people to death.
Well, that's correct. Yeah. Well, that's one thing that is still. I mean, stoning people to yeah.
So it's like if you have a large subset of the population that believes stoning is justified, and then you have a foreign power there that is like giving books and materials and building schools or whatever sort of external, like they're trying to rub off on them in a way. You're kind of going from A to Z if this this human brain, the culture, the way of thinking is caught up in this hundreds and hundreds, a couple thousands of years. It's just, God. Well, you look at how they live. It's in the desert. It's
right. It's a loose comparison, but this is why things like on our Constitution exist, and not even the Declaration of Independence, but the Constitution, I believe. I might be wrong on this, correct me, but where, I'm sorry, it's one of the amendments, free from cruel and unusual punishment. These are why these basic rules are set in our government, so that at least it couldn't happen from any kind of government agency that somebody could get stoned to death in public. This happens in Saudi Arabia. I mean, if you go into deep web stuff, it's really sickening, but you could still watch videos of this happening to people, women, like adultery. So like old kind of these crimes that exist, but they're still doing this to people to this day.
Hung in the streets,
which is, that's the Wild West shit. We did that too, but
we got
past that.
Yeah,
correct.
So these systems and ways of thinking and morality tied up in our documents and the Declaration and whatnot, that's pretty new age with all things considered, right? That idea. I was thinking of this earlier. I forget which point exactly. I think it was with holding our politicians accountable. The idea that if people are born kind of naturally selfish, then like religion in a certain capacity and morality, you're supposed to have these ideals which then hold you accountable and guide your way of thinking to where it leads you away from selfishness, or it leads to a plethora of outcomes that are hopefully going to be deemed good because you're making all of your decisions off of this morality, which is like a lot of Christians and Mormons, for example. Like you meet a lot of people that are held by their faith, and they're usually pretty good people. I mean, you have atheists who are assholes, and you have religious fanatics who can be assholes. But generally speaking, you have these belief systems that the main goal of them is, some of the people, of course, would say like, oh, God is self-evident, Jesus is self-evident. These things aren't just tied in morality. It's like truly the way we were all built, the way it's like it's self-evident. But I want to focus just on the outcomes of these social systems and the philosophies and ideologies that come out of those structures sometimes, right? That's why like the concept of right and wrong, if we take our concepts and go to a foreign land that is completely different, anyone with a brain could see like, okay, there's probably going to be major conflicts there, because you're taking our idea of right and wrong and applying it to people who have an entire different way of thinking.
Well, yeah, what you have is like anywhere else, you have an area of the world that has its own set of beliefs and ideas and a culture of its own that's been running itself for 2,000 years. And then you have these set of beliefs, and like any other set of beliefs, you have a extreme and you have a liberal or progressive, whatever you want to call it, or loose. And I mean, the history of Afghanistan is a history of invaders. You had the Mongolian Empire, you had Genghis Khan, you had Alexander the Great.
That was all in that part of the world, like right there?
Yeah. You had the British Empire. Well, the British Empire in the 19th century, they were trying to protect their trade routes, the Silk Road. Then, I mean, recent times you had the Soviets from 79 to 89. They came in there under a coup. Supposedly there was a coup. They wanted them there. They didn't. The Russians were there for 10 years. And then in 2001, you had the United States who came in under the premise that they were there for counterterrorism. And, I mean, Afghanistan's been called the graveyard of empires because no one's ever been able to conquer or change for the good or bad, however you see it, the Afghanistan.
And that's almost a self-fulfilling like prophecy, because then you have people that are programmed in the area who have seen that consistent rise and fall to where trust and like in certain ideals is going to be like very broken. I think what the main religion there, I'm drawing a blank, Muslim, like people are Muslim there, right?
Islam.
So like that's their main ideology, and that's a whole, and generally speaking, of course, that's a whole separate conversation. But then you have guided scriptures and philosophies within Islam and the Quran that like shape decision making there. So it's almost like you're taking the book of Christianity and kind of trying to apply ideals to people that follow a whole subset of ideas. But with that being said, there can't be constant subjectivity on, there's no truth because everyone just thinks differently. Like you have to have something, and I can't think of the exact term, Guns, that ties into philosophy where it's just about outcomes. But just for this example's sake, like you can measure outcomes, let's say reducing pain or reducing harm.
You're talking about utilitarianism?
Yeah, I think that's it. Like
the greatest amount of good for the greatest amount of people.
Exactly. So just to apply that to what we're talking about here, one could argue that like this belief system, the American belief system, Western democracy, not perfect, poses the greatest outcomes for the majority of its people. Like the least amount of suffering. With all of our problems in 2021, we could still make the claim like suffering like physically at least is reduced. People make arguments about mental health and how we would be happier as tribal folks being hunter-gatherers, blah, blah. We're not there right now. Look, we got
cameras,
brick walls.
We got everything.
That's not us. Yeah. So, but still, the outcomes of people being born gay in that part of the world and being stoned to death or however they kill them, like that's just a clear-cut example of the furthering along of our ideology and accepting those variables and still loving them for it, rather than that ideology speaks to killing them. It's like it's just a clear-cut example.
You're assuming that your way of life is better than theirs, and you're talking about people who have their own set of cultural beliefs. They have their own religion. They don't like what we have going on here. No, I am.
You're not stating your own opinion.
I'm being very broad.
Yeah.
Okay. You also have them. They're being taught their history is a history of invasion. All throughout their life, people have tried to come to Afghanistan to take their materials, to conquer them, and to change their way of life. The people have to want to change.
Yeah. So to tie that into this,
they're going to be always, not always, but hostile of anybody trying to come in.
And then just a quick point, like I've thought about, as more phones exposing that young population to other parts of the world, I think that kind of diversifies your brain in itself. If someone sees like a beautiful image in America of people laughing and hugging and cheering, or a concert, whatever it may be, I have hope in a great capacity with technology there, because I think that exposes those rural communities that only know their human to human culture and connection to like think of that could be really good in the long run. But what do you say, Brad?
No, continue.
So that could be really good in the long run, but to tie it in back to the point of withdrawing from Afghanistan, those people clinching to the plains, in my opinion, people have reported on it, that's because they see, like, there's a subset of population, many of them in that area, they're clinching on to hope of America and democracy, literally to the point where they're willing, they've probably never been in a plane or maybe in a car that has gone so fast to produce, like, them knowing, like, oh, if I clinch onto this plane, I'm going to fall off and die because it's going to be at 500 miles an hour here pretty quick. I'm not going to be able to hold on. They're like, it doesn't matter. I'm clinching on because I'm going to hold on to this fucking leg. I'm going to hold on to this wheel, and I'm going to make it safely.
And it's going to take me to the promised land.
Exactly.
Right.
That's the thing. That's so crazy. That's so tragic. And that speaks to the beauty and maybe the truth of democracy and Western society and how it should be applied to some of these places around or not applied, but the option of here, like, this is our outcome. It's not perfect, but guess what? We're not stoning gay people to death over here because we've made it pretty far. And those people running on the terminal, running on at the airport, a lot of them didn't want us there or leaving. They wanted us to stay there to help them. The girls were able to show their faces. They were able to get educated. There was all of these positive benefits that they were reaping some of these benefits, and now, from what I've seen, it's all gone. They're like, man, back in the kitchen with you.
Is it morally permissible for us to have been there in the first place?
Is it morally permissible?
Because you're affecting change in some way if you're there.
Yeah. Is it morally permissible?
Yeah, to interfere.
I would say yes, because I'm of the belief that if you have done your due diligence and you have a solid written plan and you're executing it to where we're going to build X amount of schools, we're going to take X amount of tax dollars to siphon in these resources to help educate women and children and everyone in that country, because we want to, people make the argument education is best. It's morally permissible because you're making the claim that the outcome through doing that is going to produce more good than harm for this country. So it's morally permissible. In, let's say 15,000 years, if we look back and say America thought they were doing good, right? Everything was morally permissible. They were the city upon a hill. They were spreading democracy. But something that we haven't seen yet is bound to happen in the future through democracy. We just haven't seen it yet. Only time will tell. Then we'll look back and it was still morally permissible. It's just those people were ignorant to what happened. But I think the only way to live, the only way to be healthy as a human race is to stand up for what you believe in, but to not be ignorant with your beliefs, to put in the due diligence of if you're going to push forth X, Y, and Z, you should have evidence and try to back it up.
I don't think we've seen how bad democracy can get, but we've seen the build up to it, right? I mean, the Civil War. I mean, people turned on their own countrymen and were willing to kill each other over what they thought was right because of their region of the country they were living in.
Yeah, not just region, ideals, right?
Ideals, which is how it exists now. You think somebody from Mississippi probably would love a chance to, maybe have a gun. They're like, oh, somebody from Seattle or something like that. Like, tell them to come meet me down here or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's tie that into history a little bit, Guns.
Yeah.
Huh.
So, democracy. Who was the first people to do it? Romans, right?
Yes, they had a republic.
Republic.
Well, you can totally go back to the Greeks, but yeah.
And this trips me out. The Greeks, yeah. Because we've been around for how many years? 76?
What do you mean? 1776, yes.
So however many years.
Not even
right?
300.
250 something, I don't know.
The longest, the Roman Empire lasted for what, a little over 2,000, something like that?
No.
No?
About 1,000.
Okay. So much longer than where we're at now.
Well, you can... Yes and no, because it's split into the Eastern Roman Empire.
Okay, so it still technically fell apart, but there was still baseline democracy, right?
Yeah.
And that's where we got those ideas from, through that spread throughout Europe, of course, and then.
But the people, like back to your point, the people have to want you there in order to affect change. Like a lot of the wars in the 20th century, even Kuwait in the 90s, there are fantasized in films and movies and books and other things. But you got to realize that when those people were coming there, they were seen as liberators because they were liberating them from a foreign force. The Taliban and Al Qaeda are not foreign forces; they're religious extremists, and they're in their country. You know what I'm saying? Like when we, World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Kuwait, we were liberating. We were removing foreign invaders and restoring their countries back to the people. We were liberators. We're not liberators. We came there under counterterrorism.
So it was, of course, it ties into.
They weren't foreigners. They were people inside the country. They're extremists.
9/11 gave some power, and the people were supporting
we might have
get in there and
we might have had the moral backing to go into Afghanistan, but the people who were causing the issues there weren't outsiders. They were Afghanis. They were just, if you want to define them as religious extremists, that's how I define them. That's who they are.
Yeah. And in problem solving for that, I mean, my brain kind of goes to, if you could pool every person in the country, do you love your Taliban leaders? Do you agree with this ideology? Is this what you want? Yes or no? If 60, 70% or the vast majority say no, what if there's like a world, what about this? What if there was like a world organization that, like, you implemented that system when there's enough phones? Let's say in 1,000 years, wait, think of it. In 1,000 years, every person, you could make the claim, every person in 1,000 years is going to have a phone. And voting by then is 100% going to be digital. So in a country that has this representation of oppression, people are just going to hop on, and there's going to be this world organization that's going to be like, okay, in Afghanistan, the people are voting tomorrow on whether they want this leadership or not. If the vast majority vote no, and that elected or that group that was ruling chooses not to step down, then there's going to be some world organization army that's just going to go in there and still apply the people's word, right?
Yeah,
but people like, that's
we're
globalism.
Diving pretty deep into theory, but yeah.
But is that what we're heading though with like globalism, do you think?
I mean, maybe, but some of these war-torn countries can't overturn their governments because of they don't have access to technology to spread word and make accounts and Facebook groups and stuff. Like the what's an example, like Democratic Republic of Congo, I believe. I mean, they've been, or another one, Somalia, been in a civil war since the 1990s. I mean, I don't want to reference Black Hawk Down, but that country still looks like that, like everywhere. So how do you expect people to change their society, overturn their government when they have access? And it starts with education, but they don't have anything. Education, no technology, all the stuff we take for granted. They don't have any of it.
They want the change. I mean,
they want the change. They can't. They can't.
They have to want it to. And
right.
It's like you see in the United States, you see someone who's on the East Coast, someone on the West Coast, someone who's in the Midwest and in the South and in Texas and in the Northwest. You have a cell phone, you're all connected now. So as time goes on, we're all going to become more and more interconnected, and eventually the entire world is going to be, interconnected. What's going to happen when kids in Afghanistan or adults in Afghanistan or whatever country it is in the world have access to the internet? And that goes on for a generation. So every 100 years, you get anywhere from 2 to 4 offspring per family, right? So 2 to 4 people are going to be born, and if they're born with cell phones, how much is that society going to change with access to the internet? How much have we changed? A lot.
Dude, I've never thought of that before, but I'm pretty sure one day when we're not even there yet, think of it, we haven't even made voting digital. Like, we haven't put it on the blockchain. I think it's going to go there. But when every person has a phone, because it's a communication barrier, Brad, to your point, it's a matter of what's locked in this person's head. They don't have the resources to overthrow X power. They're suppressed. There's going to be an organization that under moral rule is going to make the claim, we are liberators of the world of oppressed people. We have a voting system on blockchain that's connecting everybody, and they put forth voting rights, and people be like, oh, I want this leader, I don't. And if that opposing power chooses not to relinquish it, they're going to fucking go in with their military and give them the resources to have the people's word spoke. Dude, that seems logical to me.
Are you saying it's
sounds
possible?
Like more war and conflict.
No, it's sad, but people are, I'm not saying this is what I believe. I think people in power one day, like the climate accord, what's the other, the after World War I or II, what's the huge organization? NATO. Like, it's all justified based off of such a bad event. We need this global communication and collaboration to put forth good outcomes. One day, they'd be like, oh, now every person is able to vote. We're going to send in our liberators.
Are you saying...
You're very hopeful.
Are you saying that it's possible that one day things are going to come to a global vote. So if you can imagine kids on the savannah in Kenya have a phone and they can vote. I mean, I'm not making a joke.
They will
I'm being
locally.
serious.
No, I think there's going to be an overarching fabric of like different nations collaborating. You're still going to have nations. You're still going to have nation states, but you're going to have some sort of global system. Because if we're trying to get to a point of anti-racism and that all humans are created equal under God, whatever you want to believe, if every human comes to the point of we are human, therefore we are equal. It doesn't matter what color you are, where you are on earth. That is going to breed a system of, okay, then we need a uniform, overarching look at everything to make sure there's certain oppressions and atrocities that aren't occurring no matter what country you're in. Therefore, they're going to birth that regulation. And you'll still have U.S. doing the U.S. things. You'll still have Texas doing Texas thing, California doing its thing. You'll have Orange County. You'll have the city of Orange. It's going to still go down to the granular level. But mark my words, I think one day, whether we're here or not, there's going to be...
Yeah, what's the timeline on this?
I don't think our kids will be here when that comes.
What's the timeline?
I think like I said, 10, 15,000
The
years.
history of
the
history of humans is a history of conflict. Humans don't get along with each other.
Right.
No, we don't. But I don't think that argument is... Of course, we have to base...
I mean, this is all
things
theory
in,
right
Of course,
now.
we have to base our ideologies in history and like not repeating mistakes. But I think through technology and connecting every human mind, there's going to be a global consciousness one day where morality and ethics are going to become on a level playing field.
A lot of people thought the same thing when the radio was invented.
True, but I'm still saying like that
And
exponential growth.
Printing press.
And the printing press in 1400.
No, but it's still, we can look back on it now and say that printing press had X distribution in X area. Yeah. That's still finite. I'm talking about an inevitable global connection where everyone's plugged in, therefore everyone's operating on a similar moral and ethical fabric.
So your ideal is that the kid in Newport Beach has the same access to information as the boy in Kenya, the boy in North Korea, or something like that.
Yeah. And I'm not even saying infrastructure. Jesus. I'm not saying culture has to be the same. No. Right, I'm not saying we have to apply that to everyone around the world. All I'm saying is let's base it in the Constitution when we say every man is created equal. That was, of course, looking back, finite to that group of folks, that ideology, maybe certain hues. People are like, yes, this applies to white man over here, but black man at that time, no, it doesn't apply to you because we're not equal. I'm talking about when you take those words for what they truly mean, everyone's created equal, there's going to be some sort of overarching umbrella that holds people accountable to that idea of everyone's equal.
Right, you would hope the meaning of you would hope the meaning of equal changes over time, right?
Yeah, right, because equal's relative to your surroundings.
Because they thought it was equal at the time, but it was all men are created equal for
property owning males.
Property owning males, that's correct, and nobody else at all.
Exactly. So, very simply stated, that phrase, if you recognize, if the kids in rural Russia to Africa to Australia, if everyone realizes, there's humans over there, they think this way, but they are humans, therefore we have a certain level of equality, that is going to be baseline. I was about to say I promise you, but
You're
I can almost promise you.
It. Yeah. But think of that, 7 billion people and counting, though. That's
but dude, think of it. This has never existed. This phone that I'm holding, the
the
ability to be plugged in.
How old is the iPhone, Grant?
Yeah,
Can you pull that up?
2007, I believe.
How old is the first iPhone?
Look what it's doing to the United States, though. We're all interconnected.
Dude, growing pains.
Growing pains?
We're fucked. We're fucked in a certain level because we're not.
You think it's going to get better eventually?
100%.
Or we're just going to learn how to live with it? Get better or learn to live with it? Difference.
I mean that's
better
because
I think humans will always re-engineer out of problems. Some that are you can't get out of, but it won't be world-ending.
You want first
iPhone
2007,
first released.
First generation iPhone, June 29th, 2007.
I used to be jealous of kids in high school that had it. It's like all the rich kids have the iPhone.
You used to have to jailbreak. I know this because it was the first, I think it was the iPhone 4 that I had in middle school. You used to have to jailbreak it to change your home screen. Imagine that now.
Yeah.
The simplest capability on that software, and now you used to have to be able to jailbreak to change it. And now you have cameras that can take photos of the moon, like the galaxy.
Dude, the progression of technology ties in. It's
16.
there.
How many years is that? 2007? 14 years?
So we've
Crazy,
got
15 years.
all right. So wait, any closing arguments? So on the Afghan withdrawal,
there's no clean way. It wasn't going to end
wanted to
clean
get
no matter what.
shout out Patrick Kelhai, bro. I'm trying to get you in here so you could speak to the intricacies of what actually happened because he served major tours there. So I'm curious, like, bro, you literally your blood, sweat, and tears were devoted to this idea and the execution of this plan, and now we pull out and the claim is that nothing happened of good there. I would still disagree and say there's going to be a generation of kids that remember when the U.S. was there and they are going to grow up to be leaders in their communities and try to spread those ideas. But you're going to have a large subset of Taliban folk that, oh, the woman over there, put your fucking burqa back on, whatever it's called. So you're going to have that. But
right, and that's not going anywhere though. That's Islam, the hijab and those things. Those have been there for thousands of years, regardless of democracy. Those minor cultural practices are not going anywhere, no matter what.
Yeah, I don't think they have a system that allows progression.
That's correct. Yeah. They are stuck.
So
they are stuck.
Not saying that progress isn't going to come, because if you look at human history, progress has always come, even with growing pains.
And it causes problems too.
Yeah, I mean, the people have to want it.
Do you think a majority of their people do or do not want it?
Well, the predominant religion there is Islam, right?
Yes.
So
yes. Sunni and Shiite.
Yeah, like any other religion, you have more, free, liberal, and you have more conservative ideology and culture and perspective. You got to move them left. They have to move left, or they're going to stay where they are. That's been true of everything, even in the American experience here. It's always shifted left.
Yeah.
It's always shifted left.
And we can talk for hours about the growing pains with this plug into technology now causing divide on the left and right on a level that is unprecedented. But
sorry, I got a leak.
You what? Yeah, take a leak. It's all good. But closing out that point, it's sad because the way I see it is those 5.7, 5.8, whatever it was, $1 trillion that were spent there. Imagine if all those resources were allocated to
infrastructure,
our homeless problem. Freeway. Yeah, exactly. All of the problems on our own shores. But then you could also make the argument, oh, how many of those military folks who built their whole lives and wanted to serve, and how much employment money and X, Y, and Z would have not been there. But
going to war is not
exactly.
You can't go to war to generate jobs. That's wrong.
That's what they do, right? The military-industrial complex. That's the whole premise.
Yeah, but you shouldn't go to war to generate jobs. That's morally wrong,
for sure.
In my opinion.
For sure.
I think most people would hold that opinion. Does it happen? Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well,
that's very clear. I'm not saying that's better in any way. If you could say 5.7 trillion towards infrastructure, schools, jobs here on shore,
clean energy,
that just sounds better. Let's employ that rather than spreading.
Yeah, I'm not saying reduce the power of our military.
Yeah.
I'm just saying let's try not. I mean, the death toll, I think, probably, and I'm not saying we did it, but the death toll in Afghanistan is like 100,000 or something.
Brad, you can move it. It's easy.
It's like 100,000 people died. I mean, most of those are civilians. I'm not saying we killed them.
Yeah.
They died within combat because we armed them and we allowed them to fight. The people who wanted to fight against the Taliban fought, Afghanis.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we lost, and this is probably not accurate, but I think we lost like 10,000 American soldiers.
How many U.S. soldiers died?
4,000?
I think a lot more, like you were saying, Afghan, like soldiers that we armed, they perished mostly, not U.S. forces.
No.
But
so 30,000 suicides. I like this. Okay, so 37,000. Okay.
You don't like it, but you like the fact that it's pointing out.
I like the fact that they included it.
Yeah.
A lot of people aren't going to think about what happens after they leave
the
service.
Approximately 177,000 national military and police from Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, and Syria allies have died.
Yeah. Was it worth Americans dying? That's the question.
It's always the question of every war, right?
No, people make the argument that one life wasn't worth it.
Correct.
And then you add 5.7 trillion and how that could have been allocated to better society, and it's fucking sickening.
Mm-hmm.
But then our ability to innovate and to feel protected is because of our superior military. Don't get me wrong. Like, we're still very tribal and animalistic. There's people out there that want to do harm to us. So in order to build a safe society, you still need that protection.
How many U.S. bases do you think we have worldwide?
U.S. bases worldwide?
Yeah, military bases.
I'm going to guess like 860.
I think you're right. Last I looked years ago was about 870 or something.
Are you serious? I've never looked at that stat in my entire life.
Yeah, see? 600 overseas.
Okay, 600. So I'm off.
I mean, I would never say that some of the military people have it easy once they get through training, but some people are stationed on islands that'll never see any sort of action ever. I mean, they're in military, but they're in paradise.
Yeah,
you know
some veterans will come back and they'll get that sticker on their car. It says combat veteran, other than just veteran.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
There's
huge difference.
There's a classification of hardness and like being like this person went through X when they're a combat veteran in comparison to IT.
Yeah. Right, like Patrick. Right,
600 overseas, and we pay for that. We fund that because we think it's right.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think gathering intelligence to prevent atrocities, that makes sense. If you're gonna have a global ecosystem and economy, the idea of like the simple idea, someone overseas is going to produce a 9/11 attack and do us harm. Therefore, we need some sort of oversight to regulate that. That makes sense. The line where you draw it, of course, will never be 100% answered. That's up for debate. But that makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need to see what's going on around the world.
Yeah.
Let me grab you some more water. Grant. So I think the next point I want to let's go to the Rittenhouse trials. I don't know if it's on here actually. It's not. Guns, let's speak to it. Here, I got you. Can you pull up, just Google the Rittenhouse trials, Grant?
Thank you.
Hold it still.
All right. Shaky from that Johnny Walker whiskey.
Yeah, that was fire. That mellowed it out. Opposite of shake. So this was recent, later in 2021. Kyle Rittenhouse, of course, many people know, crossed state lines to go defend ex-business area. I think it was his friend's like car dealership, some familial friend, after the BLM protests, right? It was right after all the protests were happening.
Mm-hmm. It was during.
Yeah, and there was misconceptions there because for the longest time, media coverage was perpetuating the idea of racism and how systematically that's what was tied up in this. It was like white on black crime or however you want to see it. There's still crimes that were broken. Lives were lost. Was it completely tied into racism? Absolutely not. But I think he's 18 now. Okay, yeah, so he is 18 sobbing. The time of the crime, I believe he was 17.
It doesn't matter. Even if he was 17, they would have tried him as an adult.
For sure.
So it doesn't matter, really, the age thing. I mean, he's 17 or 18. He's a teenager who don't always make the best decisions. But the big thing about this case was, I think, is applying the laws. He was legally able to carry a weapon. He was legally able to be there. And it just came down to, can they prove that he was in threat of his life?
Self-defense, yeah.
Self-defense, and they did, and they acquitted him. Or they dropped the charges. Not acquitted him, sorry, dropped the charges.
Yeah. No, and you could tie in the George Floyd verdict, too, on the opposite end of someone being held accountable for their actions and malice and taking a life. It's different. So you could say taking a life, that's not equal. There's differences in how it's done, and that's the beauty of our law system, right, and judicial system, is to find out where's that threshold crossed to where someone is going to be put away, or for places that still have the death penalty. And in listening to the jury, it's always fascinated me. Our system elects people to literally drop down judgment on someone else's fate. Like whether they're going to be in a steel cage, whether they're going to have their life taken. That's pretty fascinating, right? The idea of a jury convicting someone or acquitting someone.
In criminal cases, yeah.
Yeah, in criminal cases, of course. But for this one specifically, I think even in the series of events, making the claim that taking up arms as a 17-year-old to go across state lines, to go defend a business, to play hero, people make that's the argument that's not good. It doesn't really matter whether you think it's good or not. It's a matter of whether he is breaking the written law at any given time, which could be changed and precedents will be set as time continues. But if you follow the series of events, and then not only that, people capturing the footage of what they think was Rittenhouse performing these atrocities, which I'm not saying they aren't. They definitely, I wish that never happened. But that evidence was used to acquit him because he was getting chased. He was hit with skateboards, and you could see that he was someone fleeing. He wasn't being, in the beginning stages, the vast aggressor. You can make the claim going there in the first place is the first domino of aggression. But when the line is crossed and the law is actually broken, you see that he used a exceptionally good tool at what it was created to do to defend himself in that given moment. He defended himself. And it sucks. It's sad. It should have never have happened. And I hope that if any of this ever happens in the future, through the wherewithal and knowledge built through people being exposed to this case, that kid's, should I go over there to that city to defend this building with my AR-15? Hopefully he stays home. I think that argument could be made. That's the point of, as you said, I'm an optimist, of learning from your mistakes.
I think you have a 17 or 18-year-old teenager who was bored at home, who felt like he could do something by going out there. Well, you said his first act of aggression was going there. I mean, if he's being truthful and the reasons he was there was to protect property, then he's not going there to be aggressive. He's going there to defend or to protect these things, which is noble and optimistic if he's being truthful. But I think what you have at the end of the day is a bored teenager who likes guns and wanted to, play a part in his community and see something cool for the night. And maybe try to do some good at the same time. And he just got wrapped up in it. And
fuck, yeah.
Would a super fundamentalist argument be along the lines of just let the business owner himself protect his business? If he was the one that happened to shoot people and defend it to like his last breath, everybody would be supporting it. But the problem, I think it just comes that, and I'm not sure, maybe Grant, I don't know if you could be able to pull this up. Did his mom drive him across state lines?
Who drove him? Maybe, can you just look up who drove him?
Yeah.
Grant, you're nodding, yeah? Yeah, so the mom drove him. No, Brad, you're right.
Yeah,
the fundamental approach, I think that's important because people make the distinction between property, material things, and human life, right? So people make the argument if someone is vandalizing a business, an inanimate object, even that's great value to the owner, they would make the argument that doesn't prompt an external source to go into that territory to build up conflict of human to human harm. It's the same thing with San Francisco laws with stealing property. People make the argument that property, and I agree in the sense it's different than human life, right? You can't equate your car to your child, or, there are different things. But I lean towards the aisle of people's property, human nature is your belongings are part of you, right? Like your business is part of you. You tied into your family, how you make profit to run your life, to put food in your kids' mouths. Therefore, resources, like if someone keys your car, you can't, very rare will people just be like, I'm going to just go straight to insurance. It's fine. That person must have had a bad day. They keep my car. No, you get offended. So I'm applying it to when he's sitting on the couch seeing atrocities on the news or whatever, Kyle Rittenhouse, he feels obligated to perform his civic duty to go help someone else's business. It's morally virtuous, right? So many people would argue what he did was virtuous. And then other people would be like, no, let that business burn to the ground. It doesn't matter. And I think that leads to a society of chaos. But with that being said, though, you could let those perpetrators burn the building to the ground and trust in the judicial system to still apply law to them in the time to come to lock them up.
I totally disagree.
What do you think?
I totally disagree. For example, like during the Rodney King riots, these are famous photos, as I'm sure you could pull them up, Grant. You see those people, I believe, in like Vietnamese communities with snipers on top of their liquor stores.
Yeah.
Ready to pick. I mean, imagine telling people that come, especially from these countries, not always minorities, but sometimes the minorities, and they put their whole life into, a small business, a little liquor store.
No, what you want to look up is the not the Rodney King, the LA riots, Koreatown.
LA riots, Koreatown. Thank you. I mean,
No, right. You're right. Cause it's like your problem. Yeah.
Just like on top of the roof, maybe.
If you talk to these people,
I want to get that t-shirt.
Okay. So if you,
look at that.
If you interviewed one of these business owners, who's on top of their building with firearms defending their business, if you showed them the Rodney King video, they would most likely all say, they might ask the question of, what did he do? But through that case, they'd be like, this was wrong. This was wrong. Right. But as soon as you start rioting and you now take your anger to my storefront, it's now my problem. Therefore, I have the right to defend my business.
Right. And I'm not saying about this photo, I'm not saying that all of these, I mean, I don't think they're all the business owners, but this could be an example like Kyle Rittenhouse. These could be the buddies of the business owners, and they called him over, be like, our building's about to get taken over, or it's about to get burned to the ground right now. I need help.
I don't know if you have the right to defend your business property like you have the right, because you have the castle laws in a lot of states.
Castle laws?
Your home is your castle. Essentially,
you can Google it, Grant. The formal definition: castle laws.
Castle laws. So you can defend your home. A man's home is his castle. That's the old ideology.
Sounds like some medieval times kind of shit. But yeah,
castle doctrine. There you go.
Castle doctrine.
Under Penal Code 198.5 PC, California law follows the legal principle known as castle doctrine. This means there is no duty to retreat if a resident confronts an intruder inside his or her own home. Residents are permitted to use force against intruders who break into their homes or who try to force their way in.
So, I don't know if they had the same rights.
That's pretty cool.
For businesses.
I see.
Now, you had some rioters down the street from your house.
Yeah.
Last year.
I
Prior.
think
It was pre-COVID, 2019.
No, it was during COVID. It was after the BLM events.
Okay, how'd you react?
Oh, I was abiding by that castle doctrine. I was ready to go. We don't need to say in what capacity or how I was ready, but I was ready to go. No, that's why I said I'm of the ilk that if your ability to protest on public land should be there. If you cross the threshold to vandalize businesses or enter my home, it's now becoming my problem. Therefore, and it's technically all of our problems. We're all citizens with voting rights, but you can't cross that threshold. And I would simply state that in my opinion, it's not the ideal way to problem solve.
So I think Kyle Rittenhouse did not need to be there, but the reasons why he was there under our current laws makes it justified legally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you had the jury, the balanced jury as they're supposed to be. People disputed that. They said there was some bias happening, but they did their job to the best of their ability, and I think they were debating, and it was under a lot of time. They spent a lot of time figuring out what the vote was going to be.
Well, whether you think he should have been there or not, it comes down to, can you prove that he was in threat of his life? That's all it comes down to.
Yeah,
true.
So many memes of the prosecutor.
A lot of people watching that said, hey, if I was in his position, they empathize with him. Regardless of what he looks like, who he is, I empathize with him. If I was in that position, I would be scared too for my life. Okay, that's what a lot of people are saying. That's what the jury was thinking. I would be in fear of my life, regardless of why he's there. He's not breaking any laws and what he's doing. He was in threat of his life. And for a lot of people, the case, who are watching the case, I know a lot of my friends were watching it pretty closely. People wanted the outcome that they got. They wanted the charges dropped, because to them it proves that the system still works. You still have the right to self-defense. And that's why I think overall people were happy that he got the charges dropped. I think nationally, because it shows that you can still, defend yourself without repercussions. I think that's how most people feel. Is it sad that they died? Of course. They should have never been. They should have never died. No one should have to die for that.
No, and you're right.
People empathized.
I'm hopeful, and I think it's optimistic to say that people held that belief on what happened, that it was just like a proof of point that the system works and blah, blah, blah. Unfortunately, it was tied up in the tribalism, in the Trumpism, the wokeism. People on the woke side were saying, this is absolutely atrocious. This racist person was let free because there was racist people who set forth the verdict. And then you had the Trumpism, not analyzing it how you just did, which I would say is proper. They would say, oh, yes, we won. Strike that, check under our flag, under our creed.
Yeah, win for us, right?
So how do you combat that? You have to train people on how to think. How fucking hard is that?
Well, it makes it all messy too. I mean, the two people that died were not, I don't know if they were even from the area, right? And they weren't even actually there for BLM.
I don't know.
I'm not sure.
The two people died. One person got injured. One of the people, the main guy with the skateboard who was chasing him down the street, he was on parole or something. I think he had a mental issue that was going on. I think. Was it? I don't know if this is correct. Was it something with child laws being broken? Grant, can you look that up? I'm not sure if you know. I think I heard Rogan say once, like child pornography. He was on some sort of list.
I'm not sure.
Rittenhouse was?
No. One of the guys who died. The guy who shot.
But no, just more so the point that I was making.
I could be wrong there.
They weren't there for, I don't know, seemed to be the full cause of it. Like the people are supposed to be protesting who got shot, right? Jacob Blake, I believe it was. And then it turns out to be none of that in the end. And then two people end up dying from a cause that they weren't even, they were there just wreaking havoc, causing anarchy, which is, usually how it goes, it seems. It seems that the people that lose their lives are not the ones who are really there on the front lines marching for change.
Like peacefully protesting.
Right.
And so it ties into,
I
would make the claim that I think peaceful protests and protesting should be a part of our system. That's totally fine, but I don't think it's optimal in getting your point across and problem solving. It's still just mob-like behaviors. What do you see, Brad?
So the two men that were killed, Joseph Rosenbaum, 36 of Kennesaw. Okay, so he lived in the city of Wisconsin. Anthony Huber, 28, who lived in Kennesaw County.
Grosskreutz.
He testified. The medic, he testified.
Yeah, I saw that. He was the one shot in the arm. That was gnarly. Did you see what that frickin' 223 did to his bicep?
Yeah. The fast.
Shredded it. No, it's unfortunate. It sucks. But I think in tying up the Rittenhouse trial, it hopefully, if we can remove our political dogmatism and tribal ways of thinking about the matter and just realizing our system was built for a reason by very intelligent people and it's not perfect and things need to be updated when seemed fit. But the system did its job and a verdict was struck.
It means you still have the right to self-defense.
Exactly. So closing remarks, we're wrapping up 2021. It is Monday, December 27th. I think I'm going to drop this on the 6th just for the insurrection date. Just to give it a full year. But
it's already a full year.
Yeah, a full year. That's crazy.
Shit.
But for those of you that know me, I'm of course an optimist, so I think we're going to make it out of all of this. I think we're heading in the right direction, and with major growing pains in different capacities. But Brad, you said you had some notes real quick. You want some closing remarks?
Yeah. Whatever you got, and then I'll
So
I'll pass it off to Kevin.
Just three items I want to just leave everyone with. I think the cult-like behavior of Trumpism and wokeism and the extreme aisles, we need to find a way to combat that together, to get some sort of healthy groupthink and realizing, even though it's simply put, and people say it all the time, the truth is usually in the middle, usually keyword, because it's not always. Sometimes people who are generalizing are very wrong. But this wokeism and Trumpism, we need to combat it and let the scientific method and truth and the best ability of us finding that truth, we need to let that stuff stand self-evident for itself. And it goes against our human nature most times, right? We're tribal, we're still animals, very imperfect, we're still growing, but we need to try to break those two real harsh systems of ideology. And I think a way of doing so, it helps, is, I forget who coined the term, mind viruses. So the idea of mind viruses, it's complicated but simple in the sense, like, we know what a virus is, we know how it spreads. The same idea of a thought, and how it could spread in your mind, how it could circulate in your thought patterns, how you could spread it to other people, how now, even though we're plugged in and there's benefits of the technology, how these mind viruses spread based on being plugged in the capacity we're at. Recognizing when your behavior and thought process becomes cult-like, and to coin Sam Harris, to think, like, do you truly believe the election was a fraud and Trump actually won? Then you could be participating in a groupthink that is a mind virus. That are your beliefs held in truth, or are you going down this whirlwind of thought where you're just caught in this virus sequence? Or on the flip side, if you think political dogmatism and racism and systemic racism, to be specific, are the root cause of all atrocities and so many problems in history, then you might have a baseline thought that's a mind virus and that it's built in dogmatism. And combating that is hard, but doing your best to let your frames of thought and your outcomes be based off of a process of thinking that isn't just a virus, but it's based in reality, based in truth, trying to predict outcomes, of course, that could be flawed, but having it based in a moral and ethical fabric that's going to pose the best outcome. That's all you could really do. No one's perfect. Everyone makes mistakes, but if you do your best to, like, learn yourself, find out what you believe in, and most importantly, be willing to change some ideas, right? You can have your concrete bottom layer built in some stern ideas of, like, don't do harm, or whatever it may be, whatever your truths are that you're not willing to change. But political truths and societal truths and things that are kind of wishy-washy, still stand up for what you believe in, but you have to be willing to change with new data, or we're lost. Otherwise, we cannot progress in a positive direction. You have to be able to change your ideas like you change your clothes sometimes. And that's kind of just some closing things. And Brad, do you have anything down there?
Yeah, I think overall as a society, we have to find a way to combat what I believe is an epidemic of misinformation. We have to be able to on all levels, whether it's coming from the media with recommendations on health, how your daily work life should look. I think it would be beneficial for everybody to really think about how they manage their daily life, from their diet, their family, all these little things can really help you kind of in the longer run. And I think it can better society as a whole when you just start in your own household. And then also that's
a good point.
Yeah. And then also just an additional kind of closing remark here. I think it's really important for people to love what you do, work for it, respect the differences of people, and take chances. And I truly believe that things are a lot better than people make it out to seem. I mean, especially in this country, I think things are a lot better than what it actually seems to be from what you see everywhere, and like through technology and the media.
100%. No, well put. I think that's totally based in truth. The fact that people like being triggered and sometimes focus on negativity, therefore the business model and media is going to perpetuate triggering stuff, right? You're not always going to be tuned in if they're showing you a golden retriever puppy video. Like, they're going to show you car accidents, they're going to show you wildfires, they're going to show you things that trigger that animal brain, right? And that seems like a problem of, if you recognize that in human nature, and if you have a business model that's built off of taking advantage of that system, then that's a problem with the business model, right? But no, that's well put. I don't think it's as bad as people seem, as people make it out to be sometimes. But it is, yeah, there's a lot of atrocities. There's a lot of bad things. Guns, anything you want to leave with the folks?
I mean, I'll hit on what you guys mentioned a little bit. Just try to regularly challenge your own perspective, and I regularly try to converse and talk with somebody who has an opposing viewpoint of yours, and see where they're coming from, because they're a product of their environment, and that's all you can really do to try to understand them and meet them in the middle somewhere. I think people would be a lot happier if they just regularly challenge their own set of beliefs and just learn to love instead of hate, I guess.
Yeah. It's simply put, but it's well put.
Yeah.
People just let love win out.
Yeah.
Like, you could solve a lot of problems just by taking the approach in the moment of like, okay, what's the most loving thing to do here?
Yeah.
And sometimes that means keeping your mouth shut and not challenging someone who's just so combative or so brash, where you kind of see like, this person doesn't really want their mind changed, or then just kill them with kindness. People say that too, right? Just be nice.
I think just regularly challenging your own set of beliefs about everything. I'm not even talking politics, just your beliefs about anything. Just have a discourse. See if you can move yourself on the spectrum from if you agree with something or you disagree. See if they can move you, sway you to be undecided at the very least, or to move you to the agree or to the disagree. Challenge your beliefs at all times.
Challenge your beliefs.
Yeah.
Oh, that's let's end on that note. Challenge your beliefs. Where can people find you on social media? What's your handles?
Kevin Guns _
Bradley Brown, but it's got like special letters.
I'll put it in the description below.
It's got a couple W's or a couple N's, because I guess I have a common last name or first name. I'm not sure, or the combination.
Both. Yeah,
both.
It's all good.
Yeah.
No, we'll throw in the description below. But thanks for coming on, guys. Yeah. I had a good time. It was a pleasure. And we're heading into 2022. In my opinion, don't let this just be like a reset you're gonna fall back into your old ways. as we get older, we're hopefully more solidified and validating good and bad habits. It's not like good and bad habits should not be cyclical, right? It should be like you stick to it. No one's perfect, but do what's best for you. Touching on your point, Brad, it's an easy way to start off is get healthy, exercise, pay attention to what you're putting in your body, and it'll make your mental state a lot healthier, give you a better baseline to cope with the realities of life, because it's not fucking easy. It's not easy, but we're going to do it. There's never been a better time to be alive, in my opinion, and let's make it happen. You'll be seeing a lot more mind meetings next year. We're going to hopefully release a solidified schedule soon. I might be bringing on a co-host, and we'll have conversations about current events and topics. That'll be the regular feed to you guys. And then additionally, we'll still have original Mind Meetings episodes where we bring on guests, specialists in their capacities in their fields, because that's the main reason of why I want to produce these conversations, is to have diverse conversations with experts in their fields to better our perspective and understanding of the complex world that be. So with that being said, talking goes a long way, and we'll catch you guys next time.